Thank you very much, Shika. I think usually it's polite to say last but not the least. In this case, coming after Devalina and Praveen, I can say definitely the least, but also the last, right? So I realize we're running a little short on time, so I'll try to keep my talk a little short, and hopefully I will be. Being a lawyer, uh, speaking in short bursts is difficult, but I'll try. And and the other piece I think I would like to mention here is if there are questions, please do put it in the chat window, and I'll be happy to answer. Uh, Praveen and Devalina have done a great job of putting out the legal side of things, both from a pharma perspective and some of the other bigger issues that we are seeing. I thought I would not try to rehash whatever they have said, but try and limit myself to talking about the broader trends I'm seeing as an employer, as a company, as a legal professional working in India. So it's largely focused on COVID, which is the big topic of the world today. And so let me just jump right into it. As we all know, right, COVID and the impact of the pandemic has really changed things, right? And I think, but what we have found is that it's probably not not a black swan event. So it's not like an unknown thing which has come and changed everything. I think what we are seeing now is the world is transitioning to a kind of a more of a white swan event, right? So it's more of an event which is speeding up certain things as opposed to being a complete change. If you remember in the beginning in the pandemic, they said, oh, cities are going to die, people are never going to go back to office ever again, and the like. I suspect those are a little extreme. We will probably see a transition more towards certain things that were already happening in the past, but it's not going to be a complete apocalyptic situation as we feared right at the beginning. So these are my few trends that I'm seeing at a high level, and so let me. We all know about the worsening market situation. We know about the effect on the supply chain. But I think the two big trends I'm seeing, which I alluded to earlier when I said we're seeing trends speed up faster than they were before. I think one of the first one that I would point out here is tech adoption, right? So adoption of technology, which, as you know, has anyway been happening over the past few years. We're seeing a variety of new offerings coming in from, whether you use an Uber to book a cab as opposed to call your local taxiwala, or you use Airbnb to book your hotel rooms. I think you have seen technology coming into play. I think the pandemic has really, from a business standpoint, really speeded up the digitization requirements that companies have. I think almost all companies, if not all of them, will become technology companies of some form, right? So we order groceries online now. We order food online. We order, you speak to your doctors online. In a sense, they'll probably. I was interested to see that our local GP, who is a fairly senior doctor, is suddenly become an expert at WhatsApp, right? Which was not the case before. You actually had to go and meet him face to face. So if you see this, I suspect technology is going to become, for all of us who are working with different companies or in different organizations, you will find your organization becoming more tech savvy or becoming more of a tech company, right? And by all accounts, at least if you go by US survey data, 75% of people who have been using online technology believe that they will continue doing that, right? So they have found it easy to order medicines online or food online or clothes online, and they intend to continue doing that, which means there will be significant shifts in how FMCG companies operate or even retail stores operate. So we'll see some of those changes happening. But the second thing that I'm seeing, which I expect will be a trend, is the impact on how we manage our people and how you manage your employees, how you manage the staff that come and work in your office. The latest trend at least seems to suggest that a vast majority of people have actually liked the remote working concept. There is, I think, data showed that about 58% of people who were surveyed in the US suggested that they would prefer working 8 or more days from home going forward. My employer, Cisco, who also owns WebEx, which is a platform like the one we are using today, has done a survey which seems to show that 98% of all meetings going forward are expected to have at least 1 or 2 individuals attending from home, right? So this really changes the matrix. So when you're looking at it as a lawyer, you say, okay, how does this affect me? I think it affects you in terms of how you look at your function, or how you look at your profession. I think all of us who are in-house will probably have to be more knowledgeable about how technology is used, how technology works. It's very easy to tell your employees, please go home and work from home, and here is a laptop. But what happens is it creates other issues for you. It's not very clear if your IT systems can take that load coming from different parts of the place. The other big ticket item, which Debolina also mentioned, cybersecurity is a big issue, right? So suddenly, in a security parlance, it's called the attack surface, right? So if all your employees are in your office and they're using your office network to access things, you need a certain type of security to be put in around on the infrastructure in your office. But what happens if you have 100 employees sitting in different parts of the city or different parts of India and working? How do you protect them, and how do you protect their devices? Do you have the systems and the tools in place to do that? So that's a big issue that many of us are having to grapple with as we go along. There was a very interesting piece of information I came across the other day, which suggested that if cybersecurity was a country, right? If cybersecurity was a country for the purpose of revenue or GDP calculation, it would be the 3rd largest economy in the world. So only the US and China, the GDP would be bigger than the GDP or the revenue that comes out of cybersecurity crime, right? So that is one big issue that we are seeing, that as lawyers or as professionals in supporting our clients and our companies, you will probably have to grapple with more as time goes by. You also see a more increase in frauds because of the lack of oversight, because as you know, we have been focused on making sure the work goes on, the revenue still flows in, and therefore sometimes you find there will be situations where certain controls are no longer in place, right? So that's one big issue that I'm foreseeing as we go along. And then of course the other item that Debolina also mentioned, with regard to privacy, I think that's another term, and as things move more online, it becomes an issue. I was reading an interesting article the other day which talked about data, right? And there is a famous saying which many people use. They say data is the new oil, right? It's like oil. You need it to make things work. But this article suggested data is the new sewage, right? And the reason for that is it costs you a lot of money to keep it safe and to keep it away from other parts of the business. And if it leaks, there is going to be a massive stink, right? So data is the new sewage was the new analogy. So I think tech adoption would be the first, the overall trend I'm seeing across the board, which basically means us as lawyers probably need to become more tech savvy. I mean, who would have thought the quotes that Praveen was talking about and has worked so many years in? I don't think even Praveen would have expected so much online quotes to have happened, right? And it's really amazing how well the system has taken to that. But still, a lot of work still remains to be done. The second overall trend I am seeing is somewhat connected to the pandemic, but not really, right? And I think that it has to do with, it's connected to the pandemic because really the pandemic has affected every part of our society and every part of our employment. But keeping that aside, I think the trend that I'm seeing more is of the expectations of employees, right? So when you work in a company and you have a large employee base, educated employee base, we are seeing a trend now where the expectation they have towards their employers is changing, right? So I will use a very brief example from the 1930s. We talk about the Nazi rule in Germany, and the start, before everything really blew up, the Nazi regime actually conducted a census in 1933, I think, or 1933, and then again in 1939, if I'm not mistaken, in Germany. And that the census is often held by most historians to be one of the main drivers of the Holocaust that followed. Because what they did with that data was they actually identified what your bloodline was, what your family lineage was, going back generations. So if you were of the Jewish persuasion, you were tainted, so to speak, or you were identified by that mode. What many people don't talk about today is that that census was conducted using a machine called the Hollerith machine. And the Hollerith machine is a patented device owned by IBM. And actually, IBM never used to sell those devices to the governments. They used to actually license them, or they used to lease them to the government. So there are many books on this. So I'm not saying anything which is not already in the public domain. But imagine that situation happening today, where a large corporation you work for does something which is used for such evil purposes. I don't think the reputation of that company will survive after that's over, right? I think we all still use ever-ready batteries, and we all know what happened with the Bhopal gas tragedy back in the 80s. But that did not really stop the sale of the products being made by that company. But I think that seems to have changed over the years. So if there is a trust called the Edelman Trust, which brings out what's called Trust Barometer every year, and the 2019 Edelman Trust Barometer report suggests that people are tending to trust their employers a lot more, and that's largely driven by the loss of trust in traditional the institutions like the government or the media, right? So the prevalence of fake news, for example, has created a concern about people not trusting all various sources of media. But what it appears to be is that some of that trust is actually being shifted towards the employer. So one of the things that really stood out to me there in that report was that 76% of respondents, and by the way, these are almost 33,000 respondents across 27 countries, right? So it's a fairly broad survey. And 76% of them felt that their companies and their CEOs should be taking more of a lead in bringing about change, right? And doing the right thing. And some of those things are, connected to your employment or to your company, right? So there is equal pay related issues, training related issues, discrimination related issues. But there are others which are not really the normal trend, right? I mean, the normal trend usually is you work in a company, your focus is to improve the lot of your shareholders, right? Of your investors. That's it. You're not supposed to think about bigger things. But here now we find a trend where employees expect their employers to play a leading role in political issues, in environmental issues. If you see recently in 2019, Goldman Sachs announced that they will not be providing funding for fossil fuel based initiatives. And the reason for that was not because suddenly Goldman Sachs decided that they should be environmentally friendly. There is a lot of pressure being applied on people, on the CEOs and the companies to actually work towards renewable fuels and the like, because people feel that's one way to get it done when the governments are not doing what they should have been doing, or what they feel the government should have been doing, right? So I think you're seeing that trend, and you can, and I think what that leads to and what that means to us as lawyers is we need to think about things which are sometimes a little broader than our area of expertise, right? So if I can bring in, and this is not a real example, so I'm just using that as an analogy. Our products from a Cisco perspective were never used we were not really into the encrypted side of the house, right? So we would supply the products that you could use to build your network, but we would never get into the encryption side. But over time, we find many of our products are having encrypted pieces to it. So, cell phone technology as an example. So tomorrow, if I sell my technology to a telecom company in any part of the world, there are requirements on them to provide that data back to the government in most countries. It's called legal intercept. And there are many logical reasons why you need it, if there is a crime happening or terrorism or the like. Now, the question that comes up then, as a company that manufactures that piece of equipment or that piece of software, is how much do I need to be involved in deciding how that product is sold or used, right? So is it okay, for example, if my technology can be used for surveillance or monitoring of conversations between people or watching people via cameras? Am I comfortable selling it to North Korea, as an example, right? Or some of the other countries which are a little more totalitarian than the countries we live in? Will my view change tomorrow if the government changes, right? So is it okay today that Joe Biden is the president, or is it not okay tomorrow if Donald Trump is the president, right? How much of it do I want to play? The second question is it really my place to decide? Am I coming in with my own biases that are driving some of these thought processes? So there are these little vague areas which I don't think I ever thought as an in-house counsel I would have to think about, which we are having to consider, right, as things change. And so in some cases it's been easy. We have as a company gone out and issued a human rights policy, which is largely focused on supply chain to make sure the supply chain is clean and we're not using people of forced labor or anything of that sort. But in some of these other areas, I must admit, the issues are not that clean cut, right? They're not as easy for us to decide. And some of them have ethical considerations which you need to consider. We had a recent case where in one of the other larger tech companies in the US, a bunch of engineers refused to work on a product because they felt that was being used for governmental surveillance, and they believed their principles, personal principles, didn't allow them to do that, right? So I think you will find a bit of that coming up as time goes by. But net, when I look at it, and given the short time, I'll stop here. But net, if I look at it, I think fundamentally we all have to be ready to handle areas which are outside our expertise, whether it's security, whether it's privacy, whether it's technology, whether it's human rights, right? And I think that's a trend that's going to keep on happening. But I remain positive. I look forward to the changes because I think it'll all be positive, I'm sure. So thank you.